tonight I'm making sea scallops and acorn squash risotto. I've already kind of prepped my sea scallops. I'm going to turn this around so y'all can see for the minute. But I pulled off the small side muscle that was on some of the sea scallops. It wasn't on all of them, just on some of them. And then they're rinsed and patted dry, and I did a little bit of sea salt and freshly ground pepper. Hey, Tracy! On both sides. So those are all prepped. And I actually cooked a few just a little bit earlier for James so that he could eat early because they cook so fast. So I have a pan with olive oil here, and that I've turned on to medium. I'm just reusing the olive oil from when I made James earlier. And I'm going to put these on real quick. The sea scallops are a little bit tricky. They cook really fast, which is nice because you can get dinner together really quickly if you're cooking these, but also it's really easy to overcook them. So that's kind of the catch, is if you cook them too long, then they'll get really tough. But you don't want raw seafood either, so you just have to kind of find the right balance. I definitely can't stand raw seafood. I don't like anything slightly undercooked for seafood. Definitely no sushi. But scallops are just really yummy, and I love how tender they can be, and they have such a buttery flavor. They're really rich. Okay. So I've got those going. So I'm going to do these just 2 to 3 minutes on each side. So that's really not bad. And then they'll just have like a kind of a bounce to them. Kind of like if you do like a medium rare steak and it just kind of has like a little bounce when you press it. That's kind of what we're looking for in the sea scallops. And they'll be browned on each side. So you'll be able to see that in a minute. Okay, so over here I have our acorn squash risotto. Earlier, I popped an acorn squash in the oven on 350, and I let that go for about 20 minutes, and then I took it out and sliced it in half and scooped out the membranes and the seeds and popped it back in the oven for another 20 minutes on 350, and I drizzled a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper over the tops when I did that. So they were skin side down and halved for another 20 minutes. And then I took them out and scooped all of the butternut squash out, and I pureed it. So there's a little bit of the butternut squash pureed left. So it was basically just the butternut squash, the salt and pepper, and the olive oil from when I roasted it. And roasting it really brings out the flavor. And I just pureed that with my immersion blender, and I added 1/4 cup of that to our risotto. So I melted a couple tablespoons of James's dairy-free butter so that he can try this out too. And then I added a cup of arborio rice and coated that in the butter. Did that for a minute or two. And then I added the 1/4 cup of pureed acorn squash. And I also added about 1/4 teaspoon of thyme, about 1/4 teaspoon of mixed Italian spices, and I added a bay leaf as well. And before I serve this, I'll just take the bay leaf out since we don't want to eat that. And then I just stirred that together and added 3 cups of reduced sodium chicken broth. And then letting that, I brought that to a boil and then turned it down to simmer. And then letting that go for almost 20 minutes now. A couple more minutes and this should be done. So I let that go for a while and I've just been stirring occasionally. But now that it's towards the end, I like to stir it a little bit more to keep it from sticking to the bottom. I just love the flavors, the fall flavors of butternut squash, spaghetti squash, acorn squash, and how those just give like a nice rich flavor, just from, but also just a little bit of sweetness too. I like changing up our vegetables seasonally as we can, and I love doing different types of squash in the fall. So I prefer acorn squash or butternut squash definitely over pumpkin. I know a lot of people really love pumpkin, but those types of squash I find a little bit sweet as well as savory, and I really like cooking with those. Oops. Alright, so those have been going maybe 2.5 minutes on one side. I have this just on medium here. And as you can see, they have a nice sear on one side. And so I'll just do those about probably 2.5 minutes on the other side, and they'll be done just as our risotto is becoming done. And I waited to cook the sea scallops until the end, so they would be fresh when adding to the risotto. And then adding a nice salad to that, maybe some balsamic vinaigrette to add a little bit of tang and sweetness will be a nice finish to the meal. Hey Stacy, how are you? Hi Mallory. All right. So that's sizzling nicely, as you can see. And then our risotto is just thickening up here. I'm going to scoop a little bit out when this is about done to let James be able to try some. And then at the very end, I'm going to add about 1/4 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. I have about almost 1/4 cup in my fridge, so I'm going to add close to 1/4 cup. And then maybe a couple teaspoons of half and half as well, just to give it a little bit of creaminess at the end. But so far, all of this is dairy-free, making it perfect for James. I did him a little bit of a variation earlier. I added just a little bit of the pureed acorn squash to some brown rice that I had previously made and was in the fridge, and mixed that together, and then added a few cut up scallops to that. So he kind of had his own little version earlier. Oh, this is thickening it up very nicely. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the eye here. And let's see. So this was James's bowl from earlier, so we'll just reuse that. I'm all about saving this. So this is our bay leaf, so we're just going to take this out and leave the rest of the herbs in. Alright, so I'll just do a nice scoopful out of that. That should be plenty for James to try. And then I have our Parmesan cheese over here, and as you can see, I just used our barrio rice and chicken broth earlier, and there was a butternut squash puree, and then the dairy-free butter we used for James. It's really olive oil based. So I'm going to add a little bit of the Parmesan cheese, and then grabbing our half and half over here. Alright, I'm just going to pour a little bit in, so just a splash. And stir that in. I'm actually going to come over here and actually turn off our eye on the scallops, because those are looking like they're probably done. So we'll just turn these over and see how nice and seared they are on the other side too. And if I just kind of press it, it just kind of bounces back. It's firm, but it's not too hard. Alright, so, and then I'm going to just scoop those up. I should have set out a plate earlier for that. Alright, so we're just going to scoop out our scallops so they stop cooking. Oh, those look so good. Okay, so come back over here. So just finish stirring in our Parmesan cheese and the half and half. As you can see, it's getting really rich and creamy and cheesy. This will be really good. And the Parmesan will add a little bit of saltiness to it as well. Earlier I did add a little bit of sea salt and ground pepper as well. I don't know if I mentioned that when I added the herbs. Well, that looks super thick and creamy, just perfect. So all we have to do now is just plate it up and scoop out some of our risotto and add the scallops, do a little bit of salad to it, and it'll be all set. Hey, Leisha. Thanks. I'm glad you think that looks delicious. I don't know if I'm going to cook that next week or not, but if you think it looks good, maybe I'll keep that on ideas for the rotation in the future. Well, y'all take care. Enjoy the recipe. Bon appetit, and enjoy the rest of your evening.